One of my favorite things lately are micro ATX cases. They can still do a lot when it comes to hardware compatibility while being smaller and most of the time cheaper. Now it all started with me receiving a message from Mike saying he found another micro ATX gold nugget, and after seeing the photos I was so excited about the micro ATX community, but I was also upset at ASUS because they didn't reach out for a review request. What's up with that?
So this is a cute little case from ASUS, the A21, not to be confused with AP21, which I reviewed earlier. That's also micro ATX, but the A21 is like a shrunken mid-tower, around 44 liters in volume, slightly smaller than my Corsair 4000D, and surprisingly the same height as the massive Mood from Fractal. I think we've all noticed how cases are becoming the focal point instead of your hardware, but with A21 you don't have to worry about that at all. It's your components and the fans that are the hero. And so the A21 is quite bare bones from a point of view of features, but that is exactly where it shines. Except for when they totally cheaped out and replaced the USB-C port at the front for a reset switch. I see what you did there and I don't like it.
Now given the price point, what else is out there in the micro ATX space? Of course we have ASUS's own AP201. It's smaller, but cable management is more difficult and airflow was challenging. So people were reporting that it doesn't breathe as well as it should or as it looks because it's all ventilated mesh. Then we have the Fractal Pop Mini Air, which is an awesome little micro ATX enclosure that is on sale often for $69 for the black one and $89 that is the regular price, but that comes with 3 RGB fans, which is a great value add, although without any 360 rad support. Then we have the Corsair 2500, the new one, but it's kind of irrelevant if you are inching towards the value proposition with micro ATX. So actually the A21 is quite compelling in my opinion for $69, although it does not come with any fans, so you have to factor that into your budgeting. But the A21 is widely available, which is an awesome thing. It's even available in Canada. We are actually seeing more people migrating from AP201, which people loved for the micro ATX form factor, but they're going into a slightly bigger A21 for better cooling and better cable management and just slightly more room for your components to breathe. I do like the functional and visual aspects of this front metal mesh. It will capture some dust, but you will have to do some cleaning. The main idea here is airflow ventilation and easy removal for cleaning. It's just on magnets. It's also completely see-through directly from the front, so letting your fans do the heavy lifting when it comes to the visual appeal of the front panel, but it is completely solid. Okay, perhaps not completely solid when viewed off angle, but still pretty discreet. Now let me ask you, when was the last time you actually considered building a micro ATX machine over the larger ATX form factor or the more niche ITX, which is more compact but definitely more expensive? Micro ATX is where it's at. I'm so happy to see more popularity growing in that space, especially with A21 that aims to solve a lot of the issues that people had with the AP201 with the power supply at the front. And even though I have my issues with the power supply chamber with this configuration because you have a lot of wasted space if you're not utilizing hard drive storage, but for micro ATX, when was the last time you used more than one PCIe device, right? So you don't necessarily need all the PCIe lanes on a standard ATX motherboard. And also, don't you just hate it when you have a full tower or a mid tower designed for ATX motherboards, but even though when you populate or your standard ATX components in there, it looks absolutely empty. And that's exactly where the A21 comes in, because populating my standard 360 at the top, 3 120s at the front, a 120 at the back. So I'm definitely prioritizing the budget on the components, on the interior, and not the $69 chassis itself, even though it feels totally fine to house those components. And even though my graphics card is not the largest on the block, it's actually fairly compact, the interior doesn't feel so empty. That is partially because of the reduced height of the enclosure, which makes sense, but also you notice I mounted the D30 AIO at the top without any compatibility issues whatsoever. So not only is the AIO offset properly towards the side panel, but there's plenty of height above the motherboard to accommodate those thicker fans without, bumping into any of your cables. Which leads me into the cooling support on the A21, which is absolutely impressive at 360 or 280 at the front. The same thing for the top without any issues for interior compatibility, which is awesome. You can maneuver the rear fan up and down slightly. The I/O cables are neatly tucked away to not interfere with anything in the front or the top. The case does support BTF motherboards, but that's more of a me too thing, because if your priority is value, I would prioritize your budget on graphics card, maybe higher memory capacity, better storage, whatever, and not BTF motherboards, because on the micro ATX side, those are way too expensive versus the non-BTF equivalents. Now, the fact that this case supports BTF motherboards makes cable management so much better for standard microTX motherboards simply because we have two sets of channels for cable tie points. Now, the BTF cutouts can be annoying for standard microTX motherboards, but if you think one step ahead and pre-route cables in advance, especially if you have thin, low-profile cables that will fit underneath the motherboard, it makes the interior look way better than using the standard cutouts that are designed for microTX. I think ASUS did a fantastic job on the interior as well. I have zero complaints. We have the cable bar, very similar to something we find on NZXT cases. It is removable. We have full ventilation mesh on the power supply shroud. At first I thought, like, you know, you can kind of see the power supply underneath, but if your power supply is black, it's not really an issue. The cutout for PCIe cables is in perfect location with perfect length. The cutout on the frame is available to access the screws for your PCI slots. And even though we do not have removable fan brackets for the front or the top, first of all, they are not expected in this price range, but also they're not necessary. You can easily install triple 360s at the front without needing to remove anything from the top first. Triple 120s. Now, because of all this height above the motherboard, this case complements AIO builds perfectly just because we can do thick set of fans, a thick radiator without compromising on the motherboard compatibility. At the same time, if you're going with a CPU tower cooler, then you're kind of wasting all this space above the motherboard tray. So you could argue like they could have shrunken the case even more, but I think they could have definitely rethink the whole power supply chamber and optimize that, because it's, you know, power supply and two hard drives. Like, that's a waste of space. I mean, it could be smaller, you know. More interestingly, this front metal mesh has two advantages. Number one, it is so porous. Airflow is absolutely beautiful. No restriction on the frame level and on the mesh level either. And number two, because it's so porous and the fans are slightly further away, the acoustic profile, even at fans at full blast, is beautiful. We're running 1300 RPM on the fans and it's whisper quiet. My light fan is louder than this entire system with 7 fans. Incredible. Thank you, Porosity Mesh. You did well. Now, what about temperature? So after 30 minutes of gaming, the GPU is under 60 degrees Celsius, so there's plenty of room for this case to breathe. And the CPU, I mean, it's not really utilized in the gaming department, so it's kind of irrelevant. But the 360 AIO at the top, first of all, it's an amazing AIO, and there's constantly a good amount of airflow being delivered. So as long as you populate something at the front for intake and something for exhaust, you'll be fine. And I think that leads us into the conversation of, like, if cases like this are flying under the radar, imagine what else is out there in terms of ITX, microTX, ATX gems. So let me know if you want us to check something out. And is the A21, has it convinced you to itch forward to potentially consider a microTX system or not? Let me know in the comments. I'm Dmitry. I'll talk to you in the next video.